I had what most would consider a normal childhood. I climbed trees, I rode my bikes, I played with my friends. It was nice. I grew up in Bago community. We had about 9,000 people, and everybody knew everybody else, and their kids and their kids' kids and their brothers' names and their sisters' names. It was a very safe and sheltered life. In the space of a night, that safe community feeling was gone for all of us. Back in March of 1988, I was 10 years old, and my parents went out for the evening and left my brother and myself home alone. He was 13, and that evening, my brother went to bed and I decided to stay up a little bit longer to watch TV. This next part is never very easy to talk about. It's uncomfortable for me, but it's also uncomfortable as an audience to sit and listen to somebody talk about it. I fell asleep on the couch in my living room, and when I woke up, I was being carried out the door by a man I didn't know and couldn't see, who took me to his car and drove away, and for the next 3 to 4 hours, he raped me. And it was some of the longest minutes and seconds of my life. I never saw my rapist's face. I didn't get to see it. He had my head covered the entire time with a coat. And the one time I tried to remove the coat, he punched me in the mouth and told me that he would kill me. And so I figured it was safer if I left the coat on my head. And it changed my life forever that day. There was no more shelter, no more safety. My house wasn't safe. Nowhere was safe. And that's what I dealt with from a 10-year-old little girl, from one day being able to play outside with her friends and the next day realizing that boogeymen are real. Well, luckily, and it's strange to say luckily when you're talking about rape and abduction and a 10-year-old child, but luckily he brought me home within a block of my home and dropped me off. And I walked into my home, and not more than 10 minutes later, my parents got home. And they knew right away that something was wrong. Actually, my dad couldn't come into my room. My mom had to yell at him and tell him to call 911. And I was embarrassed. I had to go to the hospital. I was bleeding. There was blood everywhere. And I didn't want them to bring an ambulance to my house because then everybody would see the lights and all the kids would know that something happened to me, and that was, the idea of that was just humiliating. So I talked the police officer into taking me to the hospital in his patrol car, and he was kind enough to do that. And when I went to the hospital, they decided that I had to have surgery to fix the things that were torn. My situation is unique because over 90% of child abuse victims and over 94% of rape victims know their attackers, but I didn't. So after I got out of the hospital, they sent me to see a child psychologist. She talked to the whole family. She asked my parents if she could speak to me alone and said, "You're in a safe place. I'm gonna see if I can hypnotize you and see if you can remember anything." After my parents left the room, she said, "Okay, you are safe, but I just want you to know that you don't have to protect whoever it is you're protecting. Was it your dad? Did he come back from the party? Was it one of your uncles? Did one of your brother's friends come over?" They just didn't believe me. So I got the privilege of once a week going to downtown Goshen to the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department. And they would interview me every week. And every week, they just weren't happy with my answers. They all have children. And they know that the probability of me knowing my rapist is very high. They're getting more and more frustrated with me. And every week I'm telling the same story. And then they come up with this sketch and they ask me, "Is this him?" And I said, "Yeah." So the detective looks at me and he says, "Really, that's the man that attacked you?" Because most victims show some kind of emotion. And I didn't show any. It ended up with me trying to figure out, what were they trying to learn? What was I supposed to say that would have made them happy, that would have answered the questions the way that they wanted them answered? And after months and months, the case went cold. One of the first jobs that I had was at Martin's Supermarket off of Napanee Street in Elkhart. And I got to be a cashier. I thought I was pretty big stuff. And one day this man went through my line and he was angry and he cussed me out and left. And I literally had to walk away and lock myself in the bathroom, and I broke down. I just lost it. I started crying. And it was at that point that I realized that at any time, my rapist could walk through my checkout line. And he might know who I was, but I would have no idea who he was. And that was something that I couldn't live with that. Eventually, I ended up making the decision to get married to somebody who was in the Army, and I moved to North Carolina just to get out of the state of Indiana so that I wouldn't have to run the risk of seeing my rapist and not knowing who he was. You know, the amazing thing about me in my teen years is that I had everyone so completely fooled. They thought I was this carefree, fun-loving kid. That's what everybody expected me to be like, and so that's how I was. When you are a victim of rape, especially as a child, it affects your lives in ways that you can't begin to understand. The hardest things to fix aren't the physical cuts and scrapes and stitches. It's the emotional fallout that you have to deal with afterwards. You can kiss somebody's boo-boo away, but how do you fix what's broken emotionally? Especially when you don't know what's broken. There's nobody there to tell you or walk you through it, you know. That's why I wish I had CAPS when I was a kid. Fast forward to 2011, and I'm at my annual doctor's appointment. My doctor notices that I have some scarring. She said, it must be from when you had your children. And I said, no, I had a C-section. And she said, well, this is scarring then from when you were a child. That's what caused me to go to the Elkhart County Sheriff's Department to request my case file. And that's what actually got the case reopened. That was in 2011, and skip forward to 2013, and for the first time in 25 years, I actually knew who my rapist was. They ran it through CODIS, got a hit, and after 25 years, my own personal boogeyman was given a face and a name, and I knew who my rapist was. To the day, on the 25th anniversary, Elkhart County prosecutors pressed charges against Robert Quinn for rape, child molestation, and criminal confinement with a deadly weapon. It was one of the hardest things that I have ever done in my life, because I have never told anybody my story from start to finish. Anyone ever in my life. I spoke at his sentencing in February, and we got the max term, which was 53 years. So he is currently in prison. In 1998, I moved back to Fort Wayne. I moved back to Indiana, and I met my current husband. And we are happily married, and I am incredibly blessed. I'm learning every day how to cope. And I have PTSD, which is something that I never knew, and I have seen a counselor. She's really opened my eyes to see the things that I didn't see as a child. And life is good. Life is better than what I ever imagined it could be. And my kids are amazing, and they're happy, and they ride their bikes, and they play with their dogs, and they play with their friends and their four-wheelers, and they have a normal childhood. And I'm there for them. And that's all we can do for our kids.